Did you know that the episode you are about to listen to is available on YouTube as a full multi-camera experience? Search for the Murder Police podcast channel on YouTube. Subscribe and see what you have been missing.
And so December 6th, a torso was found.
December 6th, we get a call from Jessamine County Sheriff's Office that a human torso has now washed up on the Jessamine County side of the Kentucky River. And it's the torso from about the bottom of the rib cage, no head, no arms. So you have down to about the shoulders and from the neck down just below the breastbone. So that's what washes up.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of Goldie Massey, Part 4.
It is not. You know what I mean? So
We started researching it because Steve said, no, I think there's new, and back in
it's
the day,
kind of my
there's new
wheelhouse,
stuff.
right? I mean,
yeah.
this
There's
stuff.
the corner
and I'd
thing.
seen this. I'd seen them rehydrate fingers before, you know, injecting them with water. But
saline.
but what you have to understand is this arm had been in water the whole time.
Right.
So it was, if you've ever seen, like when you get dishpan hands, when
Sloughing.
Kind of.
yeah. So, you know, they said we just, you know, it's not good enough. So we were like, okay, we'll take you at your word.
Yeah.
Well,
But something interesting that we did find out about where it was severed was.
yeah. Well, not at that point. We knew that it had been severed. And
Cleanly, though.
yeah, so actually the medical examiner at that point had ruled that arm was a subject of they had ruled it as a homicide
Okay.
based upon discovery, facts, what they saw in it. So they had knew that an arm couldn't exist in the condition that it was in without as being a result of a homicide. And it goes back to the whole coroner's office, criminal side of it. Coroner's office can only be homicide, suicide, accident, natural, or other.
For listeners, so that's not a murder. It's a homicide.
Figure out a category to throw it in, and you throw it in that category. So homicide fits. So that's how that medical examiner's report read. So that
could be from a boat propeller, right?
Right.
We don't know what the state of the sever is at that point. We know that it was ruled a homicide. So Steve is still not on this case.
No.
So I still have other detectives working at that are next up. And so a few days go by, December 6th is when the female upper human torso.
Yeah,
Nothing was done in between because we're communicating with the Louisville State Medical Examiner's office trying to get fingerprints from this. And so December 6th, a torso was found.
December 6th, we get a call from Jessamine County Sheriff's Office that a human torso has now washed up on the Jessamine County side of the Kentucky River. And it's the torso from about the bottom of the rib cage, no head, no arms. So you have down to about the shoulders and from the neck down just below the breastbone. So that's what washes up on the.
Which is curious, right, Dave? So if you remember when I first started and you were already there, landfill.
Linda.
Right?
Yeah.
Perfect example. That's exactly what it looked like, except for
She had a little bit more toward the
upper.
abdomen.
Yeah.
It,
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
That's exactly.
yeah. And you know, what's unique about that too is that's actually a pretty small part of a torso. So was it pretty intact?
Yeah, it was. And we talked about this earlier. I have all of this in my case file, obviously fairly gruesome pictures, but for me going back to my coroner's office, just intriguing, right?
Sure.
I mean, just.
What's going to lead you to fact?
Absolutely.
And lead you to the
And
truth,
what
yeah.
was important about it is it appeared that those limbs, the head had been severed, the arms had been severed. So it was kind of leaning us in a direction, you know what I mean? Because now we had a left arm in Lockport. Now we have
a torso
an upper
missing an arm.
torso, which we believe to be female. Now, Dr. Bill Ralston, who we took he was in Frankfurt at the time. I think he's now the chief medical examiner's office in Kentucky, but he was working out of Frankfurt at the time.
He was.
We took it up to him. Well, the coroner's office took it up to him. He wasn't convinced at that time that it was female, but in the end, he felt more like female because it was in fairly poor shape. But it was, it was just super.
Who found that? Another fisherman?
I believe it was another fisherman or somebody that was down there.
Was it the
fisherman there and someone just that was out on Lockport? It was one or the other, but I remember a fisherman found one of the parts.
Right.
Any idea just where in Jessamine County the torso
just
was?
Below the locks.
Just below
the locks.
Lock 9, right?
Lock
yeah,
9.
Past Valley View down there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
not far from my house.
Yeah, I was going to say, exactly.
Yeah.
It would have to be, yeah.
So when this was found, it didn't contain breast. It was just kind of in a real poor shape.
Yeah, it appeared female, but you couldn't assume at that point. You know what I mean? Dr. Rawson wasn't comfortable in saying 100% female.
Yeah.
Certainly leaning that way,
Mm-hmm.
but because we didn't have head, we didn't have arms or anything like that, he couldn't say for certain.
Yeah, they'll stay on the fence on something like that till they're 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's probably good for the listeners because you describe below the breastbone and everything. And It's like, no, these things are more difficult. They're not, they don't look like mannequins usually, especially if time's gotten hold of them.
So I'd like to describe the detective's point of view. The listeners may think, yes, all right, yes, we found Goldie. No.
Yeah, I was going to say.
There's a ton of work. We have an arm in Henry County. We have a torso in Jessamine County. How many missing people across the state are there at one point?
That is so true. We did the case of Michael Gorley, just south of here missing. And just about a week ago, some human remains were found in Garrett County or in Crab Orchard. And that's relatively close to where he was missing from. And immediately I think that the family, they latch onto that too.
Maybe.
But then you start realizing too, and you learn that there's a lot of adult missing people from in that general area too. So while we hope maybe it has a resolution for the Gorley family, the reality of it is who knows?
Right.
And for us, really, I mean, you're talking 120 miles away from
that's
Lexington.
A good distance.
So logic starts. That's a long way to go.
Yeah, it's a long way to go, but it's both in the river, right? I mean, this isn't like one on a piece of property and the other one
is in the river.
So both are in the river. So we just are hopeful.
So so liaisoning is very important in our line of work. So in the meantime, I'm still talking with the Louisville Medical Examiner's Office saying, okay, what have you tried to get these fingerprints? What have you done? And luckily on my birthday, December 10th, they call and say, hey, we've got prints.
Well, I think back up to that though is when we took the torso to Dr. Ralston, he immediately did DNA between the arm and the torso and matched it.
Oh.
So we knew at that point the torso and the arm matched. So we're like, gosh, we need that fingerprint.
You think about back before DNA, where you'd be. I mean, right?
It would have.
Well, we kind of lived it. So, back when mitochondria was just becoming a thing and touch DNA.
Where you had to have a quarter size of blood to get an analysis. And that would just tell you.
That'll never happen. You'll have phones that flip and you can talk on them. I mean, crazy stuff like that.
I'll carry a bag in a phone or a phone in a bag.
I even found out that there's rapid DNA now, and that's even past me. So, I'm going to start talking like you guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. But there again, what a blessing in the idea that that's powerful stuff. Right?
Absolutely. And so Dr. Ralston being the whiz that he is, I mean, he was like, oh, we have this down here. We have this arm. We have this torso. There could be something going on here. So he compares the two and through some of the samples that were taken was able to confirm that those two body parts went together.
Good for him. Wow. Can you imagine? And could be not even just a deal if somebody didn't even do that.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not unbelievable. It wouldn't mean that they were lazy or anything, but if somebody just didn't make that comparison.
Just putting two together.
Yeah.
So I remember my first show here. it's so important that I don't know how many people you've had on here, how many detectives, but it's so important to make the point that if you have a detective on this show, I hope you kick them out your door when they say, I solved this.
Oh, yes.
So already we have Jessamine County sheriffs helping us. We have Louisville state medical examiners. We have Frankfurt state medical examiners. We have Henry County sheriff and coroner helping us.
Yeah.
This is a phenomenal case. Everybody's working it.
And Jessamine County coroner that we actually did an interview with.
Michael Hughes helped us out.
Fantastic.
I mean, eventually we'll have the folks down, the forensic anthropologists down at UT at the body farm helping us out. So
we're the ones that have to testify, but everybody else is so wonderful, and you can't do it without them.
Some of us
I know I
testify
say
longer
that every
than
time I'm
others.
here. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Some of us are up there for a long time. Some of us aren't.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a story for another time.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
So on my birthday, I contact the Louisville Medical Examiner's Office, and they proceed to tell me that they have come up, and Steve, we had talked to him off and on about, hey, try this. I did Google. He did Google. Steve experienced this. It suggested, hey, he's collected bodies from the water, being a coroner. This is what he recommends. And lo and behold, they did get a fingerprint off of the arm.
Oh, wow.
yeah, they were actually able to get a bunch of prints. If I remember, in looking at some of the stuff that we got back from Keith Dollinger at the KSB lab, they were able to get some really good prints.
Any idea how they managed? Yeah.
I think what they actually did is they and not to be gruesome to your audience, but they actually removed the hand from the arm. That way they could roll it better to make better prints.
Okay.
And what they did, they let the arm kind of dry,
right?
Because it had been in water for so long. They let the arm dry, and then they rehydrated the tips of the finger to make them more malleable, I think is the word that you use there. So they have some stiffness to it, so you can get some ridge detail when they roll the print. So they were successful in getting prints, and sure enough, they came back and told us, hey, that arm is Goldie Massey's arm, and we knew by that arm being Goldie Massey's arm, that torso was Goldie Massey's torso.
But how? If a person how were you able to obtain that those were her prints? Had she ever had a record of some sort? Because if you don't have a record, you're not going to know whose prints those are.
Correct. So we talked about NIBIN earlier, and it's shell casing fingerprints. There's APHIS out there, and that's the automated fingerprint indexing system, which if you've ever had your prints taken or if you've ever been in trouble, you're in it. So that's how we had Goldie's fingerprints, is because she had been in APHIS.
She had written bad checks in Bourbon County, and
there we go.
They fingerprint everybody in Bourbon County when you enter,
which is a minor offense, right?
Right,
right. But maybe as a blessing now is that
otherwise they wouldn't have known if she hadn't been.
100%.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
I mean, if she had never been arrested or never getting her fingerprints, we wouldn't have known whose hand that went to. So yeah.
So that was my birthday gift.
That was a great birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I think it was only 65 at that birthday. Right?
Yeah. Well, I showed you my Civil War buttons. I was brought them into work.
Exactly.
He shot with a musket.
So from this point, once we get the fingerprints and identify that they are Goldie Massey's, officially, I'm proud to announce Steve McCowen is the lead on the homicide of Goldie Massey.
So how'd that happen? I mean, you dodged that bullet so many times.
It was just.
It was his turn.
Yeah, I was up, and we had went all the way through the rotation from when we went out and interviewed Paris in the very beginning at his place, and we had went through so many homicides that occurred. I was back to the top, and
here we are.
Goldie's arm matched her
torso,
upper torso. So
during this time, was there any word from Zach or Paris?
Zach was in the jail still
in Bourbon County Jail. Still,
and
months later.
And we really hadn't. I mean, we hadn't made contact with Paris. We were doing our thing on the side. You know, we were adding all these things up as they were coming in. I mean,
so
obviously,
since the encounter in the doorway, you hadn't gone back to see him again?
Nope.
No.
Wow.
I hadn't talked to him.
Remember, we still have several other suspects we have to eliminate. We have Zach, right? We have the people that she owes money to. Well, in the meantime, while we're waiting for the torso and the fingerprints to come through, actually, the people that she stole money from have been calling me and telling me, She may be on the run. She owes me this much amount. She may be on the run. An older lady that when I got the cell phone records from Goldie Massey, that very same day on the 21st, she had probably called her 7 times because Goldie was supposed to show up at her home to go ahead and do her quarterly taxes, and she never showed up. So the older lady, sweet as pie from Bourbon County, said, well, I'm going to have to file because she stole enough money from me. I just can't take the loss. So she calls financial crimes at the Lexington Police Department and files charges. In the meantime, Steve and I are still working on the homicide of Goldie Massey. It's officially a homicide.
And I think an important part of that and what Chris touched on there initially are those cell phone records. So, right, we get the cell phone records back, and what we get back with that are her locations and numbers called. So, right, what do we want to do? We want to look at those phone numbers as to who are the last people that called her, because those are the last people that talked to her. So we start going through her call log and start identifying those numbers as to people that had talked to her recently. So we knew that we want to talk to those people. And that's kind of what we were doing in the meantime, is going out, identifying the numbers, identifying the people, and going out and say, hey, why'd you call Massey on this date? Hey, why'd you call Massey on this date?
Real detective work.
Yeah. What were you trying to get a hold of Goldie for? Just to shore that end up, because you think about somebody that talked to him the last time, you're like, that last person that talks to somebody is pretty good. That's somebody you want to talk to.
Well,
so
you're closing loops, right?
Yeah, and
because
we
you're going to defend
were
yourself
going,
one day.
absolutely, and we were going back a few days to talk to the appropriate people in the last days before we knew that she had gone missing.
Right. And along with those phone calls, we still have the last people who are calling her is Zach looking for her because he needs a babysitter, and Paris.
Yeah.
Because he was coming to Cynthiana to pick her up.
According to him, he was coming to Cynthiana.
Yeah. So I didn't get to go ahead and celebrate like I wanted to, strippers, balloons, champagne.
Right, exactly.
Steve and I make a plan that we're going to have to get a search warrant done. So I go home, and then Steve and I meet early the next morning, and we write up a search warrant. And for the listeners many of the listeners that I've learned on your podcast today, they were faithful. But if they're new, a search warrant just doesn't happen within an hour and you can go get a judge to sign it. It takes several hours to put the probable cause why you need that search warrant and the basis of everything you've done in the investigation thus far. And then, go ahead.
And I think part of the search warrant is, what are we looking for? What are we looking for? What do we have? We have an arm that's severed. We have a torso that's severed. We have a statement from a guy whose house that we're going to go search, who wouldn't let us in, that had some injuries. So what are we looking for? We're looking for blood. We're looking for tools. We're looking for, the things that would add up in the murder that we're investigating. We're not looking for computers. We're not looking for cell phones. We're looking for things that...
We're not looking
instruments
for love
to do the
letters.
job.
Correct.
We're not looking for... And that's the great thing. It was a minimal amount of things we can narrow it down to. We're not looking for documentation that says, I hate you, right? Because we didn't have a long-term relationship.
Tarps,
history, right?
Binding, because you think
Missing
about it,
carpet.
if you cut someone up, there's going to be a lot of blood.
Well, that and any other body fluid. I mean, there's tons in there.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing too about, again, kind of like we talked about when you're standing in front of a door and he's got arm's length and you can see inside the door. Again, if you get into a house that has those limited things and you stumble across those other things, then you can get those through serendipity or cut a second search warrant based on the defining of them. So it's a stair-stepped way in there. But that's a really good explanation, though, of how you limit yourself on the scope of what you can go into.
Absolutely. And I was always taught by these guys and by Chris and Bill and Rob and Matt and those guys, those four corners are that's your career. You present those four corners of that paper to a judge. I mean, you have to be certain on that. So we talked about it, Chris and I did, before we even started writing it, on how we were going to prepare this and what we're really going to be looking for, what we're going to be focused on. And I'm not going to say it really hurt us. Actually, I think in the end, when we did it, I think that we thought we hurt ourselves. But initially, we kind of limited what we were looking for.
We did receipts to show that they went to the bar.
But I think as we go along and as you'll hear, it actually helped us to get back in there.
His first interview was phenomenal to help us get back in there.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that.
And what we found initially in the initial search warrant and what we were just looking for limited. We weren't looking for computers and digital information and things of that nature. We were looking for tools, tarps, blood, biological.
And it would be normal for her clothes to be there, right? They were dating, right? They're adults. They're gonna be dating. So a toothbrush is not going to help us, right?
No,
nothing like that.
Yeah, and so we Chris and I sat and we talked about it. How do we need to go about this? And we thought that was the best way to do is be limited in the scope on what we had. And that's kind of what we did.
Right. So once we typed up the search warrant that very next morning, Steve and I, and this was a case, I will say, it was well thought out, well planned, and every portion of this investigation was discussed as a chess game.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting a search warrant. How are we going to get Paris out of the house to talk to us because he really wanted to talk to us standing at the door? Right.
How do we get him to headquarters where we can actually sit down and talk to him? Because if he says, I don't want to go, he don't have to go.
Right.
He can sit on the curb and watch us search his apartment.
Right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we were really game planning. How in the hell, Schoon, how are we going to get him to come down?
And I'm sure that included the Pike County affiliation.
Well,
yeah,
we started
Nothing
looking.
wrong with that.
But what was important, what we found was
we did a history on him.
Yeah, so we did a history on him and found that he had pawned a bunch of things, and he had filed a police report for stuff that had gotten stolen from him recently, and we knew one of the detectives back in property crimes.
It was shit, and there was a reason he was saying it was stolen from him.
Yeah.
I think,
and there was a report on file by one of the detectives back in property crimes. We're like, we'll use that. We'll be like, hey, let's come down and talk about this stolen shit that's been you're wanting recovered.
There we go.
And
that's exactly.
And that was kind of the ruse that we used, which came up in a suppression issue later on down the road.
But you probably survived it.
We did.
We did.
Yeah, of course. Because it's legal.
But we had to have come up with a way to say, hey, Paris, you need to come and talk to us. And if he said no, we'd be like, well, you probably want to because you have some interest in this, right?
Right.
We may have some leads on some of the stuff
that was gone
reported stolen a couple weeks ago. So that's
right. So he agreed to come down once we knocked on his door. He answered his door. It was the evening time, actually.
Did he look at you all like back?
And again,
no, he did not.
And again, we planned this out. We didn't want everybody there. We didn't bring a team of people that was going to do.
It was just Steve and I.
Me and Chris went to the door, said, hey, Paris, you want to come down? We've got this. And he agreed. So once he left, we were like, go.
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police Podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police Podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police Podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.